Hi, I'm Matt Barry. I'm an independent filmmaker, and this is Low Budget Visions, where we celebrate personal DIY independent filmmaking. I'm joined today by Alex Clegg, coming to us from Australia. And Alex runs the Late Night 99 YouTube channel, which releases shorts and feature films for free onto YouTube. And I don't know if it's your most recent project, but certainly a big one is Morana, which was the anthology feature-length project that I was happy to be able to take a part in myself. So we're going to get into all that. But Alex, before we go any further, why don't I turn it over to you for to let you introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name's Alex. I'm one of the filmmakers behind Late Night 99. There's a bunch of us, but I'm the one that usually ends up plastered on thumbnails or in front of the camera. Um yeah, I've been making films for as long as I can remember. As a young fella, my dad made stop motion films with me with Legos and Matchbox cars, and that's evolved over time. And yeah, here we are, talking with other filmmakers and yeah, sharing our visions. It's awesome.
Well, thanks so much for speaking with me today. And I think it's an amazing project that you've undertaken with Morana, and I want to hear all about that. But before we get to it, I do want to ask if you could talk a little bit, just give us some details about your background in filmmaking. How you got started, some of your first projects, your influences and inspirations, and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah, I'd love to. Like I sort of alluded to before, my interest in filmmaking was sort of came from my childhood. I grew up watching television, movies, and then over time I started getting introduced to what you'd call Hollywood movies, sort of blockbusters. Two really memorable movies that I remember watching as a kid, probably a little bit too young to be watching them, was Jurassic Park. I think I watched when I was 5 years old. And what my dad had actually done is he'd torrented Jurassic Park, and then he'd gone in and edited the film to cut out all of the blood and guts and all the dinosaurs and like eating people. And what I was left with was a movie about a bunch of archaeologists who fly over to an island. They hop out and they look at some wonderful dinosaurs, and then suddenly they're really disheveled and injured, and they all less of them hop back on the helicopter and they all fly away again with no explanation as to how it happened. But I was, yeah, one of those filmmakers where Jurassic Park was one of the first films. Another really influential one was Zack Snyder's 300. I watched about a 30-minute cut of that when I was in my early teens. And yeah, so over time I started to try and recreate the things that I was seeing on the screen with my friends. Um, I've never had any formal film school experience or any formal education around filmmaking. It's just been, I sort of did it in reverse. I learned how to make films after I'd already been making them for a little while, and just, yeah, going out with my friends, trying to recreate what I'd seen, and then um, figuring out what to do with this footage that we've got. It's in our lap now. We've got to make something out of it. And yeah, over time, as I've become more and more serious about filmmaking, and yeah, there's a few different other milestones, discovering filmmakers like yourself, Danny, the Doomed Boys, RC Films, the Don't Tell Show, Nicholas, and others. That hey, there's other crazy people like me out there who are throwing themselves into this form of art. So yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah, it's an exciting time with, so many people releasing films onto YouTube. And I've said many times that that's been a big inspiration for me, even after, a lot of years of making, independent films on my own and just trying to self distribute, self release them, put them out there. It feels like the moment has finally arrived where YouTube is being taken seriously by a lot of people, a lot of great young filmmakers who are, I think, really harnessing like the power of that platform and social media to not just put their films out, but to make people aware of them. I mean, that's how I discovered all this, was through YouTube and Twitter. So yeah, I mean, it's a really exciting moment for sure. I guess that brings us to your YouTube channel, Late Night 99. What was the when? I mean, how long have you been running that channel, and how did it start? And do you feel like the uh, work that you were posting early on do you think that's really kind of changed and evolved over the years, or have you stayed with the same focus as when you started?
Yeah, that's a great question. When we came up with the idea for Late Night 99, it was the vision behind it was definitely very different when we started. I think we, for a bit of context, we'd come off the back of a really, really interesting other project, which is actually it's on YouTube, but it's if you can find it, I'll give you a prize or something. I don't know. It was a project we made called A Few Grumpy Bees, and it's this really strange, absurd film. What I'm when I refer to myself in the plural, I'm not. I don't have multiple personality disorder, but I've got a bunch of friends from high school that had made movies with me, and they're now scattered all over the country. But help in the writing process, and then some of them are still local, and we've made new friends. There's sort of a collective behind Late Night 99. So, yeah, for fear of sounding insane, I should just explain, I suppose, that we are a group of people who are very talented and help a lot. So we'd made A Few Grumpy Bees by taking films that were made while we were in high school that had no connection whatsoever, and then deciding in our early 20s, hey, let's film the in-between bits. Like, what if this was all one chronology and we just shot all the in-between bits? And I think the light bulb moment for that project was, hey, every one of us only dies once across all of the like 12 films that we made. So what if we put it in some sort of chronology and create this nonsensical saga? So we made a film called A Few Grumpy Bees. And anyway, following that, I think there was some idea that we wanted to do something a bit more serious with filmmaking and tell more dramatic or more um, films that had more overt themes, and rather than just being silly and essentially doing sketch comedies. So with the sort of impetus behind Late Night 99 was, hey, what if we make a new chronology, a new universe? And one of the things that was going to stick all of the films or shorts together was a late night talk host. So this is bringing sort of imagery of like the Late Night with the Devil and that sort of thing. Well before that film was probably even written, but the idea was that there would be this like AM radio creepy talk host who was omnipotent and would sort of break the fourth wall and would appear in all the films. So he would crackle onto the radio, and that would be sort of the fabric that stuck all these films together. So he's appeared in I think 4 different short films if you keep an ear out for him, and in some of them he plays a big part, and some of them he plays a little part. But over time we sort of stepped away from that and started to create films that were yeah, that were absent a late night talk host, and we started to invite other people into the fold. So I think that's been where we've experienced the most growth, personally and professionally. And then as the channel as well has just been when we've invited other people in, or we've gone put ourselves out there and gone on film sets and networked in the industry, and then brought these connections back and gone, hey, what can we do together? So
That's interesting. So you've kind of branched out into the broader film industry. You're saying, as far as kind of
yeah.
networking into that. Could you? I'd be curious to hear if you could, like, kind of an overview of the film industry in Australia and what you see as independent films relationship to that. Because I have to say one thing I find really interesting in talking with international filmmakers is sort of what even the idea of independent film I think can vary a little bit from place to place because I think it always kind of exists in relation to the established industry. So I think sometimes it helps to understand what that established industry looks like, and then how does what is indie film's relation to that. So I'd be curious to hear any details you can share about that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I'm by no means an expert, but this is just my observations, I suppose. I live in Brisbane, which is a city in southeast Queensland. It's the capital city of Queensland. Below Brisbane is another major city called the Gold Coast, and on the Gold Coast, a lot of productions, a lot of Hollywood productions are filmed. So we've had basically all the Hollywood Godzilla movies, Godzilla versus Kong, Skull Island, all those films were shot on the Gold Coast. All the Pirates of the Caribbean films, or a majority of them, shot on the Gold Coast, and then other films as well, some Marvel films and etc. So what seems to be happening, as far as I can see, is Hollywood productions are shooting in Queensland to save money, potentially, and there might be different limitations or restrictions. People that are smarter than me know more about it, but so that brings a lot of like Hollywood industry work to my area of town. So a lot of the people that I'm close to and work with on Late Night 99 are involved in these productions, either as like location scouting, extras work, even heading into some coordinating roles in different departments. And so for a few of my friends, it's actually their day job, is they sign up different contracts and work different roles on set, and that's what they do. There's definitely an independent sphere that takes itself quite seriously. I don't like, and that's not a bad thing or a criticism, but it's there's quite a serious, strong, independent space in my area of town as well. But there's sort of like an unspoken way about this is how you do it that I don't really conform to. So a part of that is what seems to be happening in this independent space is you'll raise money for a production with GoFundMe. You'll you'll bring all these people in. You'll work with them. They'll probably get paid. Then you will enter into film festivals. Usually the local ones around our area, and then maybe some other more international ones, or interstate, and then the film will die usually, or maybe it gets put on YouTube like 3 or 4 years after the fact. And then some films I've worked on. An example is, I can probably mention this. There's a film on our channel called Seclusion. So Seclusion was a film that was made by this sort of industry, this indie industry. They raised money for it. They filmed it. I was on set as just a production assistant, but I think I turned into like a best boy slash sort of lighting person. Anyway, the film finished, and then it sat in limbo for years. Like it was there was a problem with the editor, and there was and they were waiting to then put it into festivals, and then they ran out of money, so they couldn't put it in, and it just died. Like it was bleeding out on the ground, gutted. And what ended up happening was I had sort of stayed in touch with the filmmaker, and we discussed the possibility of distributing the film ourselves online. And I've explained about Late Night 99, about the YouTube channel, that hey, it will not make any money, but we get between this many and this many views, like 300 to 50,000 views. You can put it on there. I'll promote the hell out of it, and let's see what happens. And the filmmaker was really happy. with the end result. We put it on the channel after tweaking a little bit and fixing some things the editor couldn't. And it ended up doing quite well. It got a few thousand views, a lot of really good feedback. And the filmmaker, it sort of, he seemed to appreciate and enjoy that process. And I think it made him feel better about his film. When people can go and watch your film, that's why you make them, right? Like, we don't make films to get accolades. You make art so that people can appreciate, enjoy it, and let you know that they enjoyed, and give you some feedback. So I think that's maybe where I don't fit into the indie space so much. Is I think I'm possibly making more film content than any other filmmaker in town. Literally, that, like, we are throwing out a film basically every single month, and that's just not happening in the independent space. In, like, serious independent filmmakers in my area make maybe one film a year, and that's a short film. No one's making independent features, or what I would, or you or I would refer to as an independent feature. People are making, yeah, low budget features in the $50,000 to $100,000 range, but yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the real challenges with the more established independent film productions is that running into, I mean, and there's any number of issues that it can run into, but like you said, it's that feeling of the film getting stuck in limbo, whether you're waiting for more financing to come through or a distribution offer or the festival is to get back to you or whatever. And I very much agree with you. It's like when I make a film, I want it to get seen, and I feel like YouTube right now is really a good place for that. I've also, I just speaking for myself, I've also experimented with setting up like DIY screenings at venues that have, just a projector and a screen, a space to show it, and then trying to do as much promotion as I can to get people to come out to that. But like you said, it's not about making the money. I mean, that's not even, that thought isn't even on my radar really. It's just about getting it seen. It's just about getting it out there. So it seems like you've really embraced this kind of DIY independent approach, not just to production, but to distribution, exhibition as well through YouTube and through Late Night 99 specifically. So it's great that you worked with that filmmaker and had that experience getting the film out. Um, speaking of your feature films that you've released through Late Night 99, first, how many features do you have on there? And second, could you kind of take us on like an overview through those films, what they are, any interesting little facts about them that you'd like to share? I'd love to kind of just hear about all the different features that you've either made or released through Late Night 99.
I think that depends on the definition of feature film. When I hear the word feature film, I think of the word feature and go, okay, this is like a featured film. This is like a Hallmark or like a highlighted film. It's maybe longer. But I think what seems to be the definition currently in our space on YouTube is anything over 40 minutes, 45 minutes roughly is considered a feature film. So by that definition, I think I've got two feature films. There were 2 years, this year and last year, that I participated in the Oscars challenge. Joel Haver's Don't Watch the Oscars, Make a Movie challenge. And for the last 2 years, I've made Oscars films that sort of clocked in around the 30-minute mark. So not quite features, but maybe featurettes or long short films. So I think for the sake of simplicity, the two features that I've released are The Way of Death, which was technically the first feature. That was for the first Oscars challenge, the first time Haver did it in 2022, or invited everyone to do the challenge in 2022. The Way of Death is a true crime a drama thriller about two friends that navigate a crime that's occurred. So one of the friends has committed a crime, and the other one gets invited into it. Then they have to figure out how to handle that situation and navigate it together. The most interesting thing about this film is that I shot the film, but with a strange aspect ratio. So I shot the film in like a 4:1 aspect ratio. So it's this really elongated frame, and the frame is split in the middle, and there's two shots operating simultaneously the whole time in the film, with the exception of the first and the final shot. And each shot will follows a different character and follows their eye. So it follows the character, and then it might cut away to insert shots that character is noticing, or is relevant to that character's experience. And the film, from the beginning of the film through to the end, occurs in real time as well. So there's sort of not a second lost. We follow each of the characters as they engage in the plot. And so that was a really interesting. I think it's definitely experimental. There's some, it sits more in the pocket of maybe what would you call, like naturalism, like extreme realism, observationalist film. It sort of sits in the pocket of that genre, with there being crime and murder and cover up and drama and arguments and fights. Like, there are dramatic elements, but there's also elements where you sort of sit back and there's not much happening. So
Gotcha. And how about Over the Next Horizon?
yeah, Over the Next Horizon, that was a film that I'd been working on that long before the Oscars challenge started. I started work on Over the Next Horizon basically the moment I discovered what was being referred to as folk filmmaking. But I'm later discovering that people have all sorts of different words for it, but I think folk filmmaking is the catchiest. So definitely thank Danny for that. But the when I discovered folk filmmaking, I think the order of discovering films was I discovered Video Carnage, Jordan Ross's film, and then I quickly discovered Sheep Theater, Danny Lotz's film, and both of those films were awesome. And then around the same time, I think because I'd heard one of those filmmakers mention folk filmmaking, and I just searched in the Google bar, what is folk filmmaking? And then Nicholas's video, what is folk filmmaking, showed up. I was like, oh, watch that. And then I realized that this guy's plugged right in. He's got the information on all the folk films, from what I could see. So I discovered you, Matt, through Nicholas as well, because he'd done a review of one of your films. So I'm like, oh, watching all these reviews from Nick, and then going and watching the films and just immersing myself in it. And at the end of all that time, what of discovery and learning and enjoying these films, it's like a week of it, I was like, hey, these guys aren't pretentious. These guys are just like me. They're just dudes making movies, and it redefined for me, what I'd sort of imposed as, hey, I need to be doing this before I make a feature film, and I need to be this, my films need to be of this certain quality to have meaning or to make an impact. And it sort of deconstructed all that for me, because I was going, hey, I can make a film that has meaning and has an impact, or I can explore a theme. I don't need to wait for an arbitrary moment in time or a level of success. So I basically started Over the Next Horizon. As soon as I had that realization, I started working on it. I literally took my camera, got together some old clothes, scratched them up a bit, put them on, took a swag with me, and I went out and found some random abandoned building, and I shot the first scenes of Over the Next Horizon there. So I then filmed. It was actually, well, when we talk about Morana, it'll be very reminiscent of this. I was creating building blocks, but I didn't know what the building was going to look like yet. And that's the best way I can explain what making Over the Next Horizon was like. I had all these random building blocks of scenes that I liked or scenes that I thought were cool. And I was going, oh, all right, well, they'll go in the film somewhere. And I'd sort of loosely tied together some sort of chronology, but I wrote the film after I'd shot more than half of it. I was just so excited and so eager to make a feature film that I just couldn't help myself. I had to start shooting it.
Yeah, I can relate to that. It's fun when you're starting out with, you've got the ideas, and just you start shooting and kind of find the project as you go along. It's funny. I'm actually getting to the point. I just have to add this as like a side note here. I'm getting to the point where I really prefer working that way as opposed to the more traditionally scripted models because for me it a lot of the fun is in that process of discovery that you're describing of kind of finding the movie of as you go along. Would you refer to it as an improvisational approach? Is that a word that you would use to
Yeah,
describe it?
I did use that word when I was pitching it to people to be involved in the film, just so they had the correct expectations coming in. I had scene outlines and I had a clear idea of where scenes, like if I was inviting someone in to help with it, because there's a few different featured extras and additional cast members, I knew what was going to happen.
Right.
It wasn't improv in that sense, but it was definitely towards the acting and the script. There was yeah, definitely an improvisation, yeah, improv approach.
Yeah, no, I think it worked really well. I guess we can kind of pivot to talking about Morana now because I love hearing about your earlier projects and everything that you've been doing on YouTube so far. Um, so Morana, that was I first heard of that project. I think you kind of put out the call back in late 2020. I think it was sometime in 2022, I believe, or it may have been 21. But I feel like
Yeah, I think you're right.
yeah. So, I mean, going all the way back to the start of the project, I guess, my first question is what sparked the idea? What was the inspiration for doing an anthology film? Also, that particular story, the scenario that you presented everybody with to kind of follow. Um, yeah, I'd love to just hear how it started.
Yeah, well, the how it started was we it was actually there were personal reasons for why Morana started. My wife and I were expecting our second child in probably in early 2023, and it was the end of 2022, so we were expecting that, and a situation arose where my wife and I ended up fostering two young girls for the entirety of 2023 as well. So we were looking towards 2023 as a family and going, holy heck, we're going from having one child to having four children in a span of a couple of months. I was experiencing a change in career, and there was a lot. We were doing some major renovations in our house as well. And I was looking towards 2023, going, I don't know I'm going to be able to film too many projects this year. So that was well, regardless, we ended up filming an extraordinary number of projects in 2023, and I don't know how we did it, but I really wanted to make another feature film coming off the back of Over the Next Horizon, and I was looking at the year going, I just don't know how we're going to do this. And so that was sort of the idea where I started thinking about, hey, well, what if I collaborate with someone? What if I make a film in equal parts to someone else? And I was like, oh, but what if we bring a third person in and we make the three of us make a film in equal parts to each other? And then I just thought, you know what, screw it. Well, what can happen if we take all the best things out of everyone else's um, toolkits and knowledge? Like, there's so much. I remember having some introspective moments where I was just going, wow, there's so much creativity out there. There's so many people who are just doing the same thing as me, and I was discovering more and more of them every day. And I thought it could be a really great way to bring the community together. It's a way that I can work on a feature film without having to film an entire feature film, but still have some sort of creative outlet and some creative input into that process. So that was really how it sort of started. In terms of the idea for a meteor, I think when I realized that I was excited to make a feature film and I was wanting to make an anthology feature, I started to think about other anthology feature films that I'd seen, and I'm, you know, not sure I've not definitely not seen every anthology film in the world, but I'm thinking about Traffic, Crash, like some of those more dramatic ones. And I'm going, okay, what are some other ones? And what came to mind was, oh, disaster films. So many disaster films, like blockbuster disaster films, have just they introduce like an enormous cast of characters that experience the apocalypse. And I think that's where I started to take that started to build the plot a bit for Morana as I was going on. All these all these disaster films have all the different characters, and I think the most recent one I've seen was Don't Look Up, but then you look back and go, oh, 2012, and the sort of Roland Emmerich films, and even like Independence Day. Like there's so many different characters in that film. So I think that's where it came from. And I wanted to, in creating the idea for Morana, I wanted to keep it as loosely planned as possible. I wanted to put sort of technical limitations or continuity limitations, so the film didn't make zero sense. Um, but I wanted to leave details of character, plot, really, events in the film, the level of absurdity people could take it to. I wanted to leave as much of that undefined, so that when I sort of passed it off to people, they could be as creative as they wanted with it. And I felt like that was sort of my way of giving back to people as well, because the film's going on my channel. It's something. It's my project. I'm working on it. But in sharing it with all these other people, I wanted them to have an opportunity to sort of have like a no strings attached creative experience where there's no expectation to make something of a certain length. Like I there's a filmmaker that contributed to Morana who contributed 10 seconds of footage,
Hmm.
and it's in the film. It's there. And then I had someone who cut together like a 20-minute short film and said, "Hey, this is how I see my footage going." I'm going, "Oh, all right, let's see." So, yeah.
What was your if you can remember and don't mind sharing, could you outline what the parameters were that you set when you put out this call for filmmakers to participate? Can you outline what those parameters were that you gave everyone?
Oh, that's a great idea. Okay, so the parameters were you've got the I set out. I remember writing a um sort of like an overview of the timeline. So that was the first thing, was people need to know what's happening on each day, because um if the whole world gets frozen over on day 3 and then one of the films is shot in sunny California, it's not going to make very much sense. So I set out the chronology of the film was the first thing, and it was just very loose stuff. Like day 1, the news spreads that a meteor is coming and it's going to destroy Earth. Day 2, um, no change. So I sort of set out a bit of the chronology. I think I tried to set up what time it was going to be when the meteor struck, and then how that time would translate across all the different areas of the world. I'm not sure how that actually worked for like that's the bit I'm editing together at the moment, and it'll be fine, but I feel like it's maybe a little bit that's a hurdle I'm going to have to navigate in the edit, so it's not confusing. Um, in terms of the technical constraints, I just said, look, just 16:9 aspect ratio. Don't do anything too crazy. Um, and and then the one of the only other limitations was just play a character you can actually play. And that was for a couple of people specifically. I just didn't want people coming. I felt like it could be confusing if they had some younger people who were contributing or planning to be a part of it, and I just didn't want like a 15-year-old detective in the film or something, and
Right.
because I wanted it to be sort of grounded in semi-realism. So
The anthology approach, I think, was a lot of fun. I mean, I know when you put out the call, I think initially I was wrapping up a project of my own, and then I realized like, oh, I would definitely have time in early, I think it was early 2023 that I wrote and shot my segment for it. I think at that point you were kind of, trying to get in like the last of the entries for it. And I was telling my wife about the project, and she works with me on a lot of my films, and she got really inspired by it. And we actually co-wrote the segment together, and a lot of the ideas started coming. So yeah, it's a fun way of putting out with these parameters, putting those out there, and then I think you find a lot of people. It sparks a lot of ideas because
Hmm.
you're giving people just enough information or just enough to think about. And once you start thinking within that, yeah, there's all these different possibilities for characters you can play, and little situations within this larger scenario that you can develop. Um,
You guys did great, by the way.
oh,
Like,
thank you.
I really enjoyed the chemistry that you had together. That was the first thing that I noticed watching through it. I was like, man, these guys, these characters really do love each other, but they're so different. But
Right.
you can really see the care that they have for each other in the film. They're both obviously wanting different things. Without spoiling too much, they're wanting they're coming into each scene wanting something totally different, like polar opposites. It's what the other character wants. But they there's moments where I related to the film, your segment a lot, because there's moments like that with me and my wife where it's like we want totally different things right now, and you're a bit fed up with the other person or you're frustrated, but you're still, if someone was watching through a camera, they would see that we love each other very much as well. But it's just pain in the butt right now, you know.
Sure. Yeah.
So
The idea certainly kind of brought out some of the dark humor ideas from of the possibilities of the situation. But oh, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. I thought it's really interesting too, because when I was thinking about when you put out the initial call for submissions or participants. I think at one point you said that you'd had I mean it was like I want to say 27 directors
yeah,
at one point.
yeah,
Did you find that, yeah, I mean, how did that, from the initial call, did you find that that number kind of narrowed down over time, or I guess it's
yeah.
just there's all sort of
People definitely
practical
dropped off
issues.
over time. People definitely dropped off over time. There was a moment where I'd had 60 roughly individual people verbally agree to be a part of it. And that scared the pants off me because I was thinking, oh no, how am I gonna do this? And I'd done the maths and I was like, this is gonna be like an 8 hour film. People make 8 hour films of just like paint drying. How am I gonna cut together an 8 hour film of like it's like 8 films? But no, over time people um yeah, dropped out for different reasons. Some very interesting um thing to think about actually, all the different reasons people couldn't do it, because I think there's a lot to learn there. There was one, I'm not going to call people out specifically, and it's not negative or anything, it's just learning. One person shot their film, they shot it, and they were so self-conscious about what they'd done that they didn't want to put it out there. And it wasn't that they were worried about offending someone or there was something inappropriate about the film. They felt too self-conscious, so they didn't submit their film. Um and then other people started working on their segments and just never finished them. So I encouraged people. There was probably about 6 or 7 different people who had shot a number of scenes for Morana, but just never sent them in. And I was encouraging these people. I said, "Hey, just send it in. We'll make it work. We can, even if you're we'll figure out how to make it work in the edit. And even if there isn't a conclusion to your story, it'll leave us wondering. Like, it's you've put so much work into the into your part. Let's, we can use it." But obviously respecting what people were wanting to do, we only included the parts of Morana that people were willing to put in. Um, and then I suppose on the flip side, there were people who submitted their segments unfinished. and sort of trusted me with that, with dealing with that unfinished story and including it in a satisfactory way. And I actually think one of the filmmakers, Chloe Gwen, who plays the homeless woman in the film, who's making all the phone calls to her family, trying to reach her brother. She, I think, in the finale, like in um in day 4, we see the conclusion of her storyline. And I think it's one of the most impactful endings to one of the storylines in Morana, and it's unfinished. We end on a dark silhouetted shot of her crying, and that's the end. But it's so tragic and beautiful, and that's just, yeah. But she gave it to me unfinished, and I think it's yeah. What was I saying? I think there's a lesson there around you might think that your project isn't finished, but that doesn't mean that it has no meaning or it can't still tell an interesting story, because where you think it's supposed to end might not necessarily be where it has to end.
It's great that you were so encouraging with everybody who participated, even as some of these issues came up, because it sounds like, it may not have been what you initially had, envisioned, but when everybody, starts to send these in, like you said, it's again, kind of finding what works and, finding ways to use, whatever anyone is able to do and, find ways to bring out all those qualities of it and fit it into the project. So I think it's great that you were, flexible with that
Yeah.
and encouraging for everybody to find what they could do and be a part of it.
Yeah, I think that was really important to me, is that I didn't want there to be any egos here. I myself am very it's something I even struggle with my films, is I strive for them to be of a certain quality that in my mind is worthy of being on the channel. Like, I'm very, very particular with a lot of my films, and in other ways I'm very laissez-faire. Like, I can be a little bit I can rush a little bit in other areas, and I make so many of them. Sometimes I don't give them the attention to detail that I should, but in other ways I'm very particular about the branding and the editing, and I have some particularities. But Morana, I had to strip a lot of that away and just go, look, there's no egos here. This isn't about this film will not be good because it looks good or sounds good, or the acting's amazing. This film will be good because it's a beautiful picture of the community. This is like it's like a monument that we're all building together and can look at and go, yeah, we're there's a unity there and a togetherness and a joy that everyone I think can experience when they watch something that they make, and then also something that their friends or peers make.
Yeah.
So I think for me it was important that there wasn't any gatekeeping, that I didn't say no to anyone or not include any segments. There was a segment that came in, and it was someone had shot some vertical, so they didn't follow the technical limitations, but they'd shot some vertical footage of just them vlogging for 5 minutes. And I was like, how the heck am I going to include this? So I ended up writing a whole segment where I play a character, because I wasn't originally going to be in it. So I wrote a segment where I played a character who has a relationship or a connection with the person on the phone, and so then I had a way to include them in Morana and highlight their segment and have it still hold an important place in the film, but just frame it a little bit differently so it works.
It's really interesting hearing all this because, of course, I mean, I knew it had to be a tremendous undertaking to, bring all this footage together and to shape it into a way that makes sense. But from what you're telling me, it's really remarkable how adaptable it sounds like you were, to, finding the possibilities and all this footage that you received and coming up with, with ways to make it work, to make it fit together. Um, I'm curious, and perhaps you've already answered both these questions, but I'll just put them out there in case we haven't touched on this yet. What was the biggest challenge, the single biggest challenge that you feel that you faced in the course of this project? And also, what was the biggest surprise, positive or negative, but what was maybe something that came out of it that you just weren't expecting at all?
Yeah, I think there's a few different challenges. The whole experience was one huge um test of a number of things, like my commitment to it. Like it was a challenge in and of itself to stick with it, because you would know as well as me, when you're working on a big project, or um I'm thinking like Cinema Detective or Forbidden Frames, like bigger, longer projects. Sometimes for me, I get to a point where I'm a little bit sick of it and I need to muster up some extra motivation to keep going. So Morana, I hit that point a number of different times, where I had to reinvigorate myself and remotivate myself to engage with it in a way that was going to be productive and fresh, and help me have the right lens. I think, like, there was some technical um things that I had to cross early on, like the color grading was a challenge, because everyone's shooting with different cameras. And my solution, if I did this in 10 years' time, I might have better skills and a better solution, but my solution was just desaturate everything and have it be a bit just a bit washed out visually. That way, yeah, there was a consistent visual language. The music was challenging. I'm like, I have to find music that sort of fits, and a score that works. And I'm not a composer. I don't have any of those skills, and I don't have too many composer friends. So that was a challenge in of itself as well. But I think the the biggest challenge for me was also the most fun part of Morana, and the bit that I enjoyed the most, and that was mapping out exactly what order the scenes would occur in. And the way that I would do that is I'd open up a document, I'd go and watch the raw footage for each day, um, and make notes about each scene. So I go like, Matt Berry, this is that scene. Nicholas, that scene. And I'd all the different directors, I'd write the scenes that they had shot for that day of Morana. And then in that document, I would move them around and visually construct a timeline. Um, and I would try and pair things together in scenes, a couple scenes all in some sort of order that um, that would draw meaning from um, from each other. So I'd particularly look for scenes that contrasted. So where an example is in the first episode, you have Jordan um, saying, like, talking about the meteor coming. So he's a news presenter and he's going, there's a meteor coming. The scientists say this, and this is what we've discovered, and the evidence is pointing at da 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 da. And then it smash cuts to the RC Boys segment, and the pastor in their film has a notepad and he's going, boys, I've got the truth right here. The meteor is Jesus. And that cracked me up, just because of the contrast between um, maybe fact and what appears in this film to be maybe fiction. And then in other segments, I'd try and pull the same sort of things, if and sometimes it's subtle and you might not even notice. But for me, I wanted there to be a bit of a dance and a bit of a choreography to the whole to each day, where, yeah, all the different dancers and all the different participants, they yeah, they benefit each other, and they make each other's performance more impactful.
I'm curious. Oh, and then I guess the other thing I was wondering is, as far as any surprises, were there anything that came out of it that you, I mean, I guess what you're describing here, what you just talked about is, one of those things, finding out just the way unexpected ways that the footage could cut together. So I guess that answers that question. I just imagine that there must have been uh, a lot of unforeseen things, good, bad, positive, and negative. Just, I mean, with the scope of this project, and I dare I ask how much uh, storage space you ended up taking with all this footage.
Oh, it was a lot. It was a lot. I had to buy two SSDs to just store all the footage, and and yeah, I've gotten so lazy with my storing of this project. Like this, the Morana files just look like a hoarder's bedroom. It's just everything's everywhere, and everything's hanging in there until I get the final export, and then I can just archive it and just format all these stupid hard drives with everything in them. When you mentioned surprises, that did make me think. The My favorite part of Morana was actually just looking at all the footage as it came in, because when you're directing a film, you know what you're filming, you know what um you you know what you're doing, you're there when it's getting filmed. With Morana, I had no idea what anyone had done. So when I got files sent to me on Google Drive, I download them, and then just watching all the takes and watching what everyone had done. Each time was a surprise. I had no idea when I was clicking on a file what I was going to see, because people didn't send me scripts. I didn't know what people had filmed. I just get a bunch of files. And then sometimes the files weren't even in order. Like, I don't even know what some of these directors intended for some of their segments. I had to make up the chronology. Sometimes it was obvious in the scene, but for other scenes, I'm going, how am I going to do this? Like, what is this supposed to come first? I don't know. I guess I'll put it together in a way that works for me. So that was probably the biggest surprise of the whole thing, was every time I opened a new file, what am I going to see? And am I going to laugh? Am I going to cry? I didn't cry over any of the raw files, but you know, definitely laughed a lot.
Well,
So,
that's a good point about trying to make sense of all the footage, because that was my concern when I was getting it ready to send to you. Is I had all the files, and I thought, well, I think it's pretty clear because I had the script, and it's like they follow the script very closely, and I was trying to think, how can I number these so it'll make sense that this one follows that one, that these are part of the same scene, the same shot, but they're different takes. And I was trying to think, I don't know. So I kind of came up with my own little numbering system, thinking it was going to be as clear as possible. But I can
you did an amazing job.
imagine.
You it was you it was very, very helpful, and having the script helped a lot. Um, but people that didn't go to that extra effort didn't necessarily rob me of any joy. I had just as much joy trying to figure out how some of these came together as I did yeah, reading the script and enjoying it in from a director's eyes. Because when I was working on a film, on a segment like yours, or like Jordan and Ethan's, I was able to look at it through a director's eyes, because they provided me all the resources and everything that um, they'd given me notes essentially, as you had, and that was very helpful. But other ones, I had to position myself totally differently, where I was coming in almost like an archaeologist, like uncovering this ancient dig, and going, all right, I think this bone goes here. So yeah, it's just different. Um, yeah, the different directors just positioned me in different ways by the way they sent the footage through.
Well, I
So
guess, yeah, once it's in, that's the thing too, is once it's in your hands, it's really up to you to shape it. And I've got to say, coming to it from the side of being one of the contributing filmmakers, I have to tell you, that's one of the things I find really interesting in watching it, is seeing, like, okay, I shot this footage, I know what I shot and everything, and then it's really interesting to see what you've done with it, as far as like what you choose to use, how you fit it into this larger tapestry of other footage that you've received. So that's an interesting part too, because of course, I'm coming from the perspective of usually every film I make, being with it from the very first stage to the very, till it's out on YouTube. So for me, it's fun to see what happens with the footage after, as I say, after it's in your hands as the supervising director of the entire film and what you do with it. And I am curious when you initially you mentioned when you put out the call for directors and you had like over 60 people express interest in this and express interest in participating, and then there was that moment of oh no, this could end up being an 8-hour film, and what is that going to look like? Did you find, because I know you had initially framed this as like an anthology feature, and it seems to have taken on, you're doing it more in parts and segments on YouTube. Is that something that evolved as, again, as the footage was coming in and just based on the sheer volume of footage you received, or how did you kind of arrive at that approach?
I think it was maybe a tactical misstep to release it in parts. It's happened now. I if I could do it again, I probably would have waited until I could release the whole feature of Morana. But I'd been wanting to explore releasing like a web series or something. And Morana was the perfect format to experiment that with. But the drop off actually probably reflects what the retention rate would be if it was a feature. So maybe it's not. Maybe there would have been no difference whatsoever, because I've no doubt if I released it as a full film, people would have probably dropped off at the same rate that they dropped off after watching the first episode. I think that's what I mean when I say it might have been a misstep. Is we had quite a large turnout for the first part, and then it's sort of really been the participants and then the core fan base. It was weird saying fan base, but the core audience rocking up.
Yeah.
Subsequent episode. But I think what it came down to was I wanted to. It had been a long time that I'd been holding on to Morana and been holding on to the footage, and I'd been working on it, and I wanted to get it out there, and I wanted people to be able to start watching it and enjoying it. And I felt like I was holding on to it for too long, and I didn't want the project to die off. I felt like if I'd waited another 6 months to finish editing it, as a whole project, there might have been some interest die off, or and then the only other thing was that Morana occurred over Christmas, and I wanted to release the Morana during Christmas time. So I think a part of me felt like, and this comes down to my sort of peculiarities and my perfectionism and selective perfectionism, I should say, is I wanted it to come out around Christmas time, and I didn't want to wait a whole nother 12 months to release it at Christmas again, or during the holiday season. So I think that's what all those different factors pushed me to making the decision to release it in parts.
Yeah, that's always the trick with releasing things online. I think of any length really, because you have to build all that momentum, and then you really have to sort of hit right at just the right moment. I think when that momentum is sort of at its peak, because otherwise, like you said, if you wait too long, it drops off. And I think I made that mistake with Forbidden Frames a little bit. I'd been kind of hyping this project, and I was trying to set up some screenings that didn't pan out, and I kind of felt like by the time I had finally went the route of just putting it onto YouTube, it was like it was almost like that moment had passed a bit. So I understand where you're coming from with that. It is a fine line of a schedule to hit, when like right when the time is when the interest is at its peak, I think. I'm curious, when you were editing or when you, I guess, reconceived the project as effectively a web series, did that influence or change how you edited these segments, or do you think it would have been do you think it would look slightly different if it were a standalone feature?
I think I've started to edit together a feature cut simultaneously. So there's a parallel feature that's getting edited at the same time. The it's very, very similar. The only differences that I'm making is in I've sort of baked into the episodes like a little recap of, this is what's happened to date, or last time on Morana, I think it says, and then it shows the little recap before each part. And then obviously there's a credit roll, like a credit reel at the end. And there's also some, I think it's a third one. I had like a dance, like an after credit dance sequence. And so there's a few different things, but usually before and after the actual core part of the film. And so yeah, so then I'm now then also, maybe you can help me decide. What do you think? I'm sort of sitting with the feature cut of Morana that I'm not quite sure what to do with, because I don't want to release it. I had a few ideas. I was like, oh, I could release it next year or something. Like I could just wait and then release it and try and renew some interest in the project. I could release it instead of the fourth part. So instead of the fourth part, I could just release the feature so people can watch it all and update themselves.
Yeah.
I mean the fifth part, sorry.
Yeah.
I've also had some people give me input that I should do a director's cut where I make it a lot more concise and trim a lot of the fat and make it like a neat 90-minute feature. But I'm hesitant to do that because that'll involve cutting out even some whole segments potentially. So there's a few different places I can go with it. What do you think, Matt Berry?
Well, that's a good question. I think I understand your misgivings about the short feature cut, let's call it, where you're going to potentially lose some contributor segments entirely. Um, releasing it as, I guess, releasing the feature in lieu of the fifth segment would be it would be an interesting way to wrap it up, and to I think it would probably generate some additional interest that way. Especially if people haven't followed every segment so far, it might be a chance to sit down and watch it in its entirety. But I also understand, wanting to continue with the vision that you laid out with the web series too. So it's a very tough thing. I don't know. I think it's without having seen the fifth segment yet, I don't know how um, would people want to, I guess, would they be impatient? Would they want to get right to the end and see how this whole thing ends or not? I don't know. It's a lot of different possibilities. But yeah, I think at the very least, releasing the entire feature, the full feature length cut eventually, whether it's in lieu of the fifth segment or afterward, it would be interesting to see it all together. So yeah, that's kind of my non-answer, I guess, to your question.
No,
No, it's
um,
hard. I guess I see the pros and cons to each. It is really tough to I'll say this. I mean probably releasing the fifth segment as a on its own as you originally planned, it it would probably be easier to promote it that way for people who have been following up to this point,
yeah,
because I guess the feature length version, it is a time commitment, and it's possible it might lose some of the people who have been following the individual segments up to this point. But
yeah.
I think you've been living with this project for almost, well, a year and a half, I guess. So I feel like whatever you decide, I think will be
Sort of like an unofficial
trustable.
housemate. We've
Yeah.
got the two kids, my wife and I got Morana living in the spare room. It's
Right. So I mean, I'm curious, what is there an option that you're leaning towards? Does something feel right to you as not only as a person who has put this entire thing together, but who's also been watching the release online? I mean, do you think that is there one option that feels most right to you?
I think I'll probably just release it as planned.
Mhm.
I'm, I Yeah, I think I'll probably just release it as planned. And my gut feeling is I'm very defensive of Morana as a project.
Mhm.
So I've had input from some really close friends and some really wise people, and it's probably the wisest choice to do with this whole project, and the smartest choice would be to polish it up a bit. And when you're polishing something or sanding something that's got some bumpy edges, you're going to knock a heap of stuff off, and it's going to be smaller. So that's probably the smartest, wisest choice. I'm so defensive of this project. I'm like, no, you can't cut that. No, we can't touch anything. And I think what I'll because if we did polish it down and make it like a neat, tidy, it'd be slightly more watchable, just in terms of the keeping attention in a more traditional sense. I could try and get it streaming somewhere. Like there could be more stuff that I can do with it.
Yeah,
Um,
well, certainly depending on your plans for it. I mean, that's a whole other matter. Yeah, I think having a running time that's, let's call it a commercial running time. It was, yeah, I think trying to go into I mean, incidentally, do you have an idea of how long the uncut, feature version would run all told?
I think it's about uh, I think it's about 2.5 hours. I think
Okay,
roughly.
that's yeah,
It's not. It's
yeah.
not almost commercial running time anyway. But my gut feeling says not gonna touch Morana. Normally I'm about killing your babies, but I think I'm gonna if I do release a feature cut, I have a strong feeling it's gonna be very, very, very close to what you saw in the episodes. Yeah, I feel like if you took too much out, it would make it less interesting to me anyway. Because I think a part of what makes it interesting is how it's yeah, like you had the perfect word for it before. It's a tapestry, and um, those big patch tapestries. There might be one small patch that looks quite amazing, but if you cut that patch out and put it on a wall, it's not going to have the same impact, because tapestries tell stories, and they're yeah.
It is an
I'm,
interesting.
I'm,
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was, I was just gonna say I like it as it is. It's I think it's I think it's awesome. It's epic. It's adorable. It's hilarious. It's heartbreaking. Um, yeah,
Yeah, it's also it's like an interesting snapshot of where everybody, um, all the participating filmmakers. It's kind of an interesting snapshot of where, they and we all are at this particular point in time when we contributed to it. It is as much a little record of that moment. It's interesting, thinking about your question of these different versions and how each one, I guess, ultimately becomes a fundamentally different project. When you're making those kinds of changes, whether you're seeing it as a web series or whether you're seeing it all together, it's um, I guess there's certain expectations that a viewer has, in watching things in a different format. And you're right, like what works as a web series might feel a little long, as a standalone feature. Not that there's anything, not that that's a problem, but like I said, if you're concerned about like a more commercial length, that might require not additional polishing and sanding of these different parts. And yeah, so it's interesting that it's not just a matter of taking the exact same footage and just chopping it up into different lengths. It's really about almost rethinking what you're doing with
yeah,
it. So I imagine that's been a very interesting part of this process for you, is just seeing how, excuse me, how things work at different in different lengths, different formats. There's some. Oh, so let me ask you this first. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yep.
I was just gonna say the smallest change can recontextualize like an entire part of the film. Even just like a couple of seconds in a cut can change the can have impacts and consequences for you know half an hour of the project. It's crazy.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, actually, having gone through this now with Morana, do you see yourself tackling another anthology project at some point down the road? I mean, is it a format that you think you might return to, or do you feel that you've explored this quite enough for yourself at this point?
It's definitely something I would return to. I've started to think about potentially future anthology or collaborative films. But I think I probably wouldn't do it on the same scope as Morana. Um, I think, but I think having um, a smaller group of participants, maybe curated for a specific genre, could be really interesting. Um, and so Morana was sort of my big, like Morana is a project for the filmmaking community, not for me or for a particular genre of people. Like I don't think apocalypse movie heads are gonna come in and go, yeah, oh, this is the best apocalypse film. And then it's not the best drama either. It's a film for filmmakers, I think, in a lot of ways because of the nature of it. But I think yeah, even a film with two or three participants could be a really interesting way to handle um to handle a feature film and online and making them. I don't see very many people making the most of that um advantage that there's many filmmakers online that have a relationship with each other, that know each other and support each other and are generous people. So
Yeah, it's a very good point. And you know, it's funny, this kind of well, we can kind of wrap up on this point, but it is something that's been on my mind recently, is this idea of collaborative filmmaking, and whether that's an anthology format where you're taking in, you know, the work, the contributions of individual filmmakers and bringing it together, or even having, you know, two or three collaborating
mm,
directors on a single project. I mean, provided that, you know, you can work together and understand that there's got to be compromises. I think we're reaching an interesting moment where that sort of filmmaking is, I think it's becoming more possible, especially as we're working more and more outside of any kind of commercial sphere.
yeah,
You know, there's probably less rigid hierarchies of, you know, needing one director, you know, but I think that that is, of course, this is all, it's going to, you know, vary filmmaker by filmmaker. I mean, there's absolutely not, I'm not advocating some sort of like, you know, one size fits all way of thinking about this, but it is just something I've personally been thinking about lately. And over the course of this conversation about Morana and also your Late Night 99 channel, and how, you know, you've got, I guess, several people contributing to that. It kind of, you know, made me come back to this point that's been on my mind. And I think it is something that, with independent filmmaking, the way that, you know, I think we're both doing it, and a lot of other people out there on YouTube and everything are doing it, that you don't necessarily need, you know, a director in the traditional sense of one person making every decision. That if you have a small team of people who share a common goal or vision for the project, that working together can bring a lot of interesting results to the table. And I think Morana, in its form of being an anthology feature, is a really great example of that, and a really interesting model, as you're saying, for filmmakers out there to look at and think, you know, how can we work together?
yeah. I think another really interesting example is what's happened with the chlorine universe, where you've got
Hmm.
three different online film studios have touched that universe and have done different things with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's definitely more that can be done. Um, yeah, more that can be done together
Yeah.
when it comes to the online filmmaking space. And I think the if it's gonna be, I think the what it comes down to me anyway is I think that and it's a good place to end it. I agree is that the it's an attitude thing. I think well, whether you end up being a filmmaker that goes and makes lots of collaborative films, or if you're just a filmmaker who likes to interview other filmmakers, or you're a filmmaker that has made a film in another person's universe. I think that attitude, um, will really lend itself well to the success of this particular community. And by that I mean people are always going to be making films online. It's just it's a new era of the medium. So people are always going to be doing this, and in fact names and faces are going to change, but there'll still be people in this space doing stuff. Whether you have filmmakers resign or move on to other mediums, more people will come in there and fill their space. Um, and I think if as a community we can remain really inviting, really supportive, really open, I think that'll create more late night 99s, will create more low budget visions, it'll create more people who sort of, it's like when you walk into a room at a party, and I get a bit of social anxiety. So when I walk into a room at a party and I don't know anyone, chances are I'm going to turn around and bail out the door the next second. But um, understanding that people coming into wanting to make films online, whether it's young people or people like yourself who've been making films a long time and have gone to YouTube and said, "Hey, is this going to be a place where I can exist, or I can be um, valued or viewed or whatever it is for you." I think that yeah, if we create a space that would feel welcome walking into, other people will feel welcome coming in as well. And I think that's going to be um yeah, an important part in keeping this going. And by this I mean um keeping the space a safe space for people to be releasing films and feel validated and supported when their films do come out. So
I think that's a great note to end on, and I certainly agree with everything you just said there. Uh, is there anything that you would like to just add before we sign off? Any projects that you'd like to plug? Any upcoming releases that you'd like to mention?
Um, no, not in particular. We're releasing a film every single month. That's sort of our commitment at the moment on Late Night 99. So I think we've got over 10 different films that we've shot, short films, and 2 features that we've shot and in the can, ready to edit, and we're sort of working on them as well. Pardon me. So once Morana's finished, we'll resume the monthly short films or monthly features, and there'll be, yeah, so there's, if you subscribe, there's always going to be something coming out, and it won't be too long before you see the next thing. So
Great. Well, thanks again, Alex, for speaking with me today. It's been great talking with you, and best of luck with your future projects.
all right, thanks, Matt.